Imagine two of the most respected spiritual leaders in the world, coming from vastly different cultural and religious backgrounds, finding each other and developing a friendship that transcends those differences. Desmond Tutu, an Anglican archbishop from South Africa, and the Dalai Lama, a Tibetan Buddhist leader, forged a bond so strong that it not only shaped their lives but also inspired millions. What could two people with such different experiences possibly have in common? The answer is profound: compassion, forgiveness, and the pursuit of joy. It's one of those relationships that leaves you awestruck. How could two men who have faced so much suffering still carry such lightness in their hearts? How could they laugh together, even when discussing some of the world's darkest moments? Their connection wasn't just professional or political, it was deeply personal, full of love, humor, and mutual respect. And that's what makes this story so unique. Looking for more inspiration from the world's greatest spiritual leaders? Subscribe now and discover the path to joy, compassion, and inner peace. Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop of Hope. Let's start with Desmond Tutu, a man who stood as a moral compass for South Africa during one of its most turbulent times. His leadership in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, was crucial to South Africa's transition from apartheid, a system so oppressive and violent that it left deep scars on the nation's soul. How did he do it? How did he, a man who saw his people suffer so immensely, manage to lead with such grace and forgiveness? He believed in the power of Ubuntu, the African philosophy that emphasizes the interconnectedness of humanity. "I am because we are," he often said. This simple yet profound belief guided him through some of the darkest chapters of South African history. Tutu's role in the TRC was not just about political justice, it was about emotional and spiritual healing. He knew that for South Africa to move forward, it wasn't enough to punish the wrongdoers, the country needed to heal its soul. He advocated for restorative justice, a concept that prioritizes truth-telling and reconciliation over retribution. But what must that have felt like for him, personally? Can you imagine standing in front of those who had committed horrific acts and advocating for forgiveness? The weight of such responsibility could easily crush a person, yet Tutu stood firm, grounded in his faith and belief in humanity's potential for goodness. And despite all of this, Tutu was joyful. Yes, even in the midst of apartheid's horrors, he exuded joy. His infectious laugh and playful spirit made him a beloved figure worldwide. How is that possible? How could a man who faced so much darkness still be a beacon of light? His secret was simple yet profound. Joy, for Tutu, wasn't dependent on circumstances. It came from within. Rooted in his unshakable faith and his commitment to love and forgiveness, the Dalai Lama, the exiled leader of compassion. Now, let's turn to the Dalai Lama. His life is, in many ways, a mirror to Tutu's. Exiled from Tibet in 1959, he has spent the majority of his life separated from his homeland, watching from afar as Tibetan culture and freedom erode under Chinese rule. How does one maintain compassion and nonviolence in the face of such immense loss? The Dalai Lama's answer lies in his deep Buddhist practice. In Tibetan Buddhism, compassion is not just a virtue, it's a way of life. And the Dalai Lama embodies this in every way. His teachings on karuṇā, compassion, and maitrī, loving kindness, are at the heart of his message to the world. But don't mistake his compassion for passivity. The Dalai Lama has been an unwavering advocate for Tibetan autonomy, even as he promotes nonviolence. His approach, called the Middle Way, seeks a peaceful resolution to Tibet's situation by advocating for autonomy within China rather than full independence. It's a strategy grounded in realism and a deep understanding of human nature. The Dalai Lama knows that peace cannot come through force, it must come through understanding, dialogue, and compassion. This is where his bond with Desmond Tutu becomes even clearer. Both men understood that peace is not the absence of conflict but the presence of justice and reconciliation, yet, just like Tutu, the Dalai Lama is known for his sense of humor. Have you ever seen an interview with him? He's always smiling, always quick with a laugh. Despite the weight of his responsibilities, he carries a lightness about him that draws people in. Isn't that remarkable? How does someone who has lived through exile and the near destruction of his culture still find so much joy in life? The Dalai Lama teaches that joy comes from cultivating a warm heart. By caring for others, we care for ourselves. His message is clear: joy is something we create, not something that happens to us. The friendship, laughter, love, and mutual respect, the bond between Tutu and the Dalai Lama is nothing short of extraordinary. They first met in the early 1990s, a time when both were at the height of their influence. Tutu was leading South Africa through the TRC, and the Dalai Lama was continuing his global advocacy for Tibetan autonomy. What brought them together initially was a shared respect for each other's work, but their connection quickly grew deeper. Can you imagine what their first meeting must have been like? Two of the most revered spiritual leaders in the world, sitting down together, exchanging ideas, and realizing they were kindred spirits. Their mutual admiration soon turned into friendship, a friendship full of laughter, teasing, and genuine affection. They frequently joked with each other, even about their differences. The Dalai Lama would playfully tease Tutu about his more serious demeanor, while Tutu would poke fun at the Dalai Lama's bald head. But beneath the humor was a deep, abiding respect. They admired each other not just as leaders but as human beings, and that's what made their friendship so beautiful. And this wasn't just a friendship for show. They truly cared for each other. In fact, when Tutu visited the Dalai Lama in 2015 for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday, he was recovering from a serious illness. The Dalai Lama was so concerned about Tutu's health that he personally checked on him every day, making sure his friend was comfortable. Isn't that heartwarming? Two global icons, looking after each other like brothers. The Book of Joy, Conversations on Life's Greatest Questions. Their friendship culminated in one of the most beautiful collaborations of our time, the Book of Joy. This book is a treasure trove of wisdom, humor, and heartfelt conversation between two men who have seen more suffering than most of us can imagine but still radiate joy. How is that possible? How do they find joy in the face of so much pain? That's what the Book of Joy is all about. During a week-long series of conversations in Dharamshala, India, Tutu and the Dalai Lama discussed some of life's most pressing questions. What is the nature of joy? How do we cultivate it in our lives? How do we deal with suffering? Their answers are not abstract or philosophical, they are deeply personal. Rooted in their own experiences of hardship, one of the most powerful messages of the Book of Joy is that joy is something we can choose. It's not a fleeting emotion that depends on external circumstances, it's a way of being. Both men emphasize the importance of perspective. How we look at life's challenges can either lead to suffering or joy. By broadening our perspective, by seeing things from multiple angles, we can find peace in even the most difficult situations. Another central theme is forgiveness. For Tutu, forgiveness was a key part of his work in the TRC. He believed that without forgiveness, South Africa would never heal from the wounds of apartheid. For the Dalai Lama, forgiveness is equally important. He often speaks about the need to forgive the Chinese government for what they have done to Tibet. But forgiveness is not about forgetting or condoning wrongs, it's about freeing ourselves from the chains of resentment and hate. Isn't that a powerful message? Imagine how different the world would be if we all practiced even a fraction of the forgiveness that Tutu and the Dalai Lama advocate for. They also talk about the importance of humility. Despite their global fame, both men insist that humility is essential to joy. Isn't that something? In a world that often equates success with ego and self-promotion, here are two of the most successful people on the planet telling us that humility is the key to happiness. Their humility is not a weakness, it's a strength. It allows them to connect with others on a deeper level, to see themselves as part of the larger human family. The 8 Pillars of Joy, a guide to lasting happiness. In the Book of Joy, Tutu and the Dalai Lama outline what they call the 8 Pillars of Joy. These pillars are essential practices and attitudes that, according to them, lead to lasting happiness. Let's dive deeper into each one and explore how these pillars can transform our lives. Perspective. So much of our suffering comes from a narrow view of the world. When we are stuck in our own perspective, everything feels heavier, more difficult. But when we zoom out and see the bigger picture, we can respond with greater understanding. Both Tutu and the Dalai Lama emphasize that changing our perspective is the first step toward cultivating joy, humility. In a world that often glorifies self-importance, humility can feel counterintuitive. But Tutu and the Dalai Lama remind us that true joy comes from seeing ourselves as part of a larger whole. We are not more important than anyone else, we are all interconnected. When we practice humility, we open ourselves to deeper relationships and a greater sense of purpose. Humor, laughter is such a powerful tool for healing, and both men use it regularly. They remind us not to take ourselves too seriously and to find joy in life's absurdities. After all, life is full of surprises, both good and bad. Humor helps us navigate the unexpected with grace, acceptance. Life is not always easy. In fact, it's often quite difficult. But instead of resisting or denying the challenges we face, Tutu and the Dalai Lama encourage us to accept them. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up, it means acknowledging reality as it is and choosing to move forward with an open heart. Forgiveness. This might be one of the hardest pillars to practice, but it's also one of the most transformative. Forgiveness frees us from the burden of anger and resentment. Both Tutu and the Dalai Lama know this firsthand, having had to forgive those who caused them and their people immense harm. Gratitude. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have. It's a simple practice that can change everything. Even in difficult times, there is always something to be grateful for. By cultivating gratitude, we open ourselves to joy, compassion. Joy is not found in self-centered pursuits. It comes from caring for others, from recognizing our shared humanity. Both Tutu and the Dalai Lama argue that compassion is not just a moral duty, it's the key to lasting happiness. Generosity. When we give, whether it's our time, our resources, or our love, we experience a sense of connection and purpose that enhances our well-being. Generosity is not just about material giving, it's about being generous in spirit, suffering and joy, a paradox of the human experience. One of the most compelling aspects of Tutu and the Dalai Lama's teachings is their emphasis on the relationship between suffering and joy. It seems paradoxical at first. How can joy exist in the face of suffering? But these two spiritual leaders show us that joy is not the absence of suffering, it is the way we respond to it. Both men have endured immense hardship in their lives. Tutu witnessed the horrors of apartheid. And the Dalai Lama has lived most of his life in exile. Yet, they both exude joy. How is that possible? It's because they have learned to transform suffering through their spiritual practices. They don't deny the pain or try to escape it, they embrace it with compassion and forgiveness. In doing so, they find peace and, ultimately, joy. The Dalai Lama often speaks about the importance of cultivating a warm heart in response to suffering. When we respond to pain with kindness, both toward ourselves and others, we can soften its impact. Tutu, too, has spoken about the transformative power of forgiveness in healing the wounds of apartheid. For both men, joy is not about avoiding life's difficulties but about finding meaning and purpose in them. Advocacy for peace and justice, a shared mission. Both Tutu and the Dalai Lama are not just spiritual leaders, they are also fierce advocates for peace and justice. Their commitment to these causes is deeply rooted in their spiritual beliefs. For Tutu, the Christian principle of loving one's enemies guided his work in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He believed that South Africa could only heal if people were willing to confront the truth of what happened during apartheid and then forgive. Similarly, the Dalai Lama's Buddhist beliefs have shaped his advocacy for Tibetan autonomy. Despite the suffering of his people, he has always promoted nonviolence and dialogue as the only paths to peace. His middle way approach seeks a peaceful resolution to Tibet's situation that respects both Tibetan and Chinese interests. Isn't it remarkable that two men from such different backgrounds could find common ground in their pursuit of justice? Both Tutu and the Dalai Lama have shown us that peace is not something that can be imposed. It must be cultivated through compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. The legacy of Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, a call to action. As we reflect on the lives and friendship of Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, we are left with an undeniable truth: joy and justice are deeply interconnected. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that true happiness is found not in the absence of hardship but in how we respond to it. They have shown us that through compassion, forgiveness, humility, and gratitude, we can cultivate joy even in the most difficult of circumstances, but their message is also a call to action. It's not enough to admire their wisdom from a distance, we must embody it in our own lives. Can you imagine what the world would look like if we all practiced even a fraction of the compassion and forgiveness that Tutu and the Dalai Lama lived by? The world would be a much more peaceful, joyful place. Conclusion: the joy of connection. In the end, the friendship between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama is a testament to the power of love, laughter, and shared humanity. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their pursuit of joy and justice. And through their lives and work, they have shown us that joy is not something we wait for, it's something we actively cultivate through the choices we make every day. Their friendship, their wisdom, and their laughter will continue to inspire us for generations to come. Through their legacy, they have given us a blueprint for how to live a life of purpose, resilience, and, most importantly, joy. And isn't that something we all need a little more of?